Welcome. Thank you very much for coming to the lecture today. We are going to go on a whistle-stop tour through some big questions in raw food. My name is Thompson. I'm a vet. I qualified from University of Edinburgh in 1992, and I have been interested in raw food since the mid-90s. Okay, so about 25 years I've been looking at raw food, the pros, the cons, where do people have conceptual issues, all aspects of raw food. Okay, when I started, raw food was just a freaky, tiny little sideshow, but nowadays I think most of the food industry is talking about raw food in one way or another. Yeah, even the guys at the top, the Purinas, the Hills, the big kibble companies, they are, I promise you, talking about raw food. I've made a list of the important aspects of raw food that I think we really need to cover in the short time that we've got, and I've highlighted in particular the questions of bacteria, the questions of bone, and the questions of complete and balanced. These are some of the main misperceptions that I see. Okay, so I'm just going to dive straight in. At the end, maybe about 3 o'clock, we can have some questions. Okay, but if you can bite your tongue until then, that would be really good. Let's see how we go, and we will just race through. So the first question that is very, very common, and I think in Finland and in the UK we have different perceptions. I believe that in the UK the bacteria problem, the problem with listeria, salmonella, with bacterial contamination of meat is by far one of the big issues. In Finland, from talking to people here, it sounds like bone and issues regarding bone are the big issues. But let's just look at bacteria for now, because this is something that I talk about every single day. So there are two aspects to bacteria, very simply speaking. We've got the bacteria that will always be on any raw food product. And we've got the other side of it is the bacteria that are in every single tissue in the body. Yeah, when I was at college, it was considered that the brain was sterile. There were no bacteria there. They now know that there are indwelling, very beneficial bacteria within the meninges, within the brain. There are bacteria in the placenta, okay, which you cannot do without. There are indwelling bacteria within a newborn baby. There are bacteria without which we cannot live. The mitochondria are descendants of bacteria that we came together with millions and millions and millions of years ago. So the bacteria story, yeah, we all grew up with bacteria is bad, you must wash them with bleach and things like this. The bacteria story is much more complicated than that. It is impossible to produce raw food without some bacterial contamination. The good news is that the bacteria that we find on raw food is probably the cleanest thing that the dog comes across every single day, because the dog will go to the park. They'll wander around on the park and they'll stand in soil and in poo and in all sorts of things. They'll then come home and lick their feet and their genitals. When they meet their friends, they stick their nose up their bum. So when they come home and they eat a good quality meat, it's probably the cleanest thing that they come across. There are bacteria there, but within their world, it is a very clean product. And if we look at the statistics, there are very, very, very few dogs or human beings that have been injured through contamination of bacteria, contamination of the food, that the dog eats, either damage to the dog or to children in the household or to the adults in the household. Okay? The statistics are very much on our side. 25 years ago, raw food was a very, very small thing. And so, of course, there weren't many people feeding raw. So you could say, oh, there's not many injuries because there's not many people feeding it. But nowadays, in Finland, it's maybe 5% of people feeding raw, which is an enormous number of people. In the UK, it's up to about 10% of people are feeding either completely raw or some raw every single day. 10%. 9 million dogs. So that means we're talking about 900,000, almost 1 million dogs every day are exposed to raw food. And where's the body count? There isn't one. Okay? We do not we do not find contamination. And I promise you, there are some veterinary surgeons who are not so keen on raw, who are on the lookout and would just love if they came across cases where a raw-fed dog had been injured because of the bacterial contamination. It's not happening, people. It's just not happening, okay? Which is fantastic news. So, microbiome, you could not live without. Contamination is not something you really need to worry about, okay? The raw food producers, they go to massive lengths, and the whole meat setup within the UK, within Finland, we're doing very well, yeah? In the United States, they work very hard, but their regulations are not as rigorous as ours, okay? We are leading the world with these things, and that's fantastic. So, for me, the bacteria question is not massive at all. Why are dogs resistant to bacteria that would otherwise give us? Yeah, you try eating raw chicken and see how long you would survive. The reason that they can eat it is because they have a very, very, very acid stomach. It's 10 times more acid than ours. Yeah, you drop raw chicken into the battery acid, what's going to happen? All the superficial bacteria, any contamination, is just going to get fried immediately, okay? They also, dogs, if they have lots and lots of contaminated food, and it's usually because they've eaten something disgusting in the park, not the good food that they eat in a bowl, they've got a very short gut, okay? Because the food that they are designed to eat is very rich. Yeah, it's very high in protein and fats. Yeah, it's very, very rich. Unlike a cow, which has to work very hard to get all the nutrients out, dogs eat nutrient-dense food, and so they only need a short gut. The great thing about a short gut is that if there's a problem, it's very easy to get rid of any contamination within your gut. Yes, which is why dogs will vomit at the drop of a hat very, very easily. They can get rid of any potential contaminants very easily. Sometimes they'll just eat it again, so it then drops back into the acid. Okay, they have a microbiome. They have bacteria within their gut which help them to maintain a very strong gut immunity. Okay, so dogs are very good at dealing with contaminants because dogs are scavengers. You know, back in the old days, we humans were described as hunter-gatherers, okay? And we always have been. We've been omnivorous hunter-gatherers, eating meat whenever we could, which was not that frequently because meat runs away from you when you go up towards it, okay? Whereas berries don't, obviously. Whereas dogs have been eating meat for a very long time. Therefore, they have developed a microbiome, a bacterial population, which is very good at resisting these infectious problems. So, again, bacteria, I really don't think is a problem. And don't believe me, just look at the statistics.